All right. What is going on, everyone? My name's Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim. Joining me today is Sam, who recently joined the SaberSim team as an analyst for us, working on our UFL and Call of Duty projections and sims. So we now have Call of Duty projections. That is brand new. Sam's also providing some data for us for the underlying UFL sims, making that product quite a bit better. So wanted to bring him on today to talk about his models here, answer any questions you guys have in the chat, and just get a little bit of a better idea of what's going on here. So Sam, thanks for joining today. How you doing?
Sure. I'm good. Yeah, just excited to be part of the team and do what I love. It's a good time. It's fun, and yeah, great to talk about it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I guess just as an intro to get things started, do you want to talk a little bit about your background just in sports modeling, projection systems, that kind of thing? Like what got you into this?
Yeah, so I've been doing projection systems for like probably 12 years. I started when I was like 14. I'm 26
Yeah.
now. I just kind of do it's like what I love to do. I've done various sports, NFL, CFB, anything you can think of. I've attempted to do. Kind of fell in love with like the niche stuff, so that's why I kind of specialize in UFL, COD, CFB. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of my background.
Nice. What is it about the niche sports that got you into them? Is it just like the lack of availability of other models, or what is it?
Exactly. Like I think it's where you gain the biggest edge,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like DFS, and I just like the challenge of it. Like it's not accessible information usually, but you have to kind of go get it yourself. And like there's so many NFL systems out there, projections. Like you're not really gonna get a big edge
Right.
doing that yourself. No one's doing UFL, or very few, or COD or CFB. So I kind of like to fill in those gaps in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you what DFS sports do you regularly play?
I pretty much everything. NFL, CFB, golf, NASCAR. I mean, pretty much everything,
That's
honestly.
pretty much
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I'm
cool.
I'm a junkie. So
Nice. No, that's good. Let's start. We'll talk about both models here. I think makes sense to start with UFL. Do you want to kind of give a general overview of what you're looking at there, like some of the main inputs that you think matter? What's going on under the hood on the UFL model?
yeah, so I'd say it's pretty standard football projection system. I mean, nothing crazy. I mean, it's UFL, so it's like there's not a ton of sample size in these players or teams or coaches.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much focusing on player market shares, rush share, receiving share. That's the biggest thing probably in terms of projection.
Mm-hmm.
Also team level stuff, pass rate, tempo, those things I adjust to as the season goes on usually, and from like prior information. So yeah, pretty much the standard stuff I would say. Nothing crazy.
So sample size, you mentioned that because I think
Mhm.
that's a big factor here. So how do you navigate that problem? I mean, there's only so many games in the season. You really, it feels like the UFL changes every offseason.
A
So
lot of
it's
turnover.
even, yeah, well, it's hard to even say, like, is this the same league as we had last year? How do you navigate that problem?
Yeah, so I think coaching, like if it's the same coach as the prior year or whatever it is, like Birmingham's had the same coach since 2022, you can kind of pick up on tendencies there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want to overreact like player efficiency because like there's 10 games in a season. A
Yeah.
receiver might get 40, 50 targets. He could do nothing with those targets.
Yeah.
Could do great. Like it's just there's a lot of randomness to it. And so I try to hone in on the usage rather than like the variable stuff like efficiency.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, you mentioned market shares too, kind of being a big factor here. Where does that information come from? Are you
Yeah.
pulling in like I don't know if there's a liquid Vegas market for player props for this kind of stuff, or is it
Not
mostly like priors from like what's happened that season already, or where do you get that
Yeah,
information?
getting pretty much all the data from PFF, which is nice. I mean, it's all accessible.
Yeah,
They were actually super late on this week. It didn't come out until Thursday for week 2, so I was kind of sweating. Like, are they going to have it out? Am I going to be able to update? Finally came out, so that was good. And I'm pretty much using that combined with my priors and what happened in the previous seasons to calculate my market shares for players and teams.
cool. I should mention here right now as well. We are pulling in Sam's data that feeds into our underlying sim.
Yeah,
So we do have still the play-by-play game simulations for UFL. So it really just kind of upgraded that whole sim because we have better underlying data. The
Mhm.
outputs of the play-by-play sim gets quite a bit better here. You mentioned you play NFL and college football as well. Are there any big differences in the way that like the game of football is played on the field that impact the way that your numbers come out?
Yeah, I would say it's night and day. It's almost a
Okay.
different sport, especially from college, because it's like so wide open, so much offense.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is like the lack of efficiency for UFL is like explosiveness. It's way lower than NFL or CFB. And then like rule changes. So you have like a running clock in UFL,
Mm-hmm.
which reduces the plays per game. And you have 2 point, 3 point conversions that are like like you have to do that after every touchdown. So just different little things that kind of add up, but just the overall product is like deafened to a degree from the other two sports.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, yeah.
And I know, I mean, I've played a little bit here and there. It seems like there's also some weird stuff with usage, like split quarterback situations sometimes, and just like
Yeah, that's the biggest
guys.
thing. Is
Yeah.
it's really hard to tell from the outside perspective, like what the coaches are thinking. So, example was Memphis last week was like a 60-40 split for QBs, and their coach said after the game, "We're going to keep doing that." And then week 2, it was 100% for a quarterback, which is out of the blue. So there's just things like that happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Players play a lot and then play at none at all, vice versa. That's the hard thing to predict for sure.
How do you keep up with that? Do you have like reliable-ish beat writers, or what does the
Yeah,
news cycle look like?
there are like probably 4 to 5 reliable beat writers and just like
Mm-hmm.
UFL Twitter accounts that will try to get information of like coaches or whatever. And then it's just kind of projecting it, like not overreacting to like what happened last week is like one of the biggest things because I could flip on a dime.
So how do you handle that? Like where? So like I guess kind of walk me through. So you're updating the model as news is coming out, and maybe you've got a weird outlier situation happened last
Mm,
week. And maybe no indication that it's going to happen again this week, but you're not sure. Like, how do you end up parsing that?
yeah.
Do you hedge one way or the other? Like, what?
So high variance situations like that, where there's like an injury or unusual usage recently, like I try to be kind of conservative with my projection because again, you don't want to be like too entrenched in what happened recently.
Mm-hmm.
So like for that quarterback situation that happened last week, I'm like an 85-15 split now, not 100-0 like what happened last week because I think there's still
Yeah,
a chance that that reverts back to week 1. So I do kind of hedge in that fashion.
gotcha. Cool. What does the process of updating your projections look like as lock is approaching? I guess especially on the practical level for folks that are building lineups on SaberSim.
Mhm.
Are there updates that are kind of coming out on your end as lock is approaching? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so for UFL, the good thing about it, or good or bad, depending on how you look at it, is there's not a ton of late news. Like after the slate starts, like you're not getting a lot of updates for injuries because it's already official, like 2 days
Yeah.
before the game starts.
Okay.
Now, this year in particular is different because there's Friday games, and the depth charts and injury reports don't finalize for games till 2 days before. So for the Sunday games, those depth charts haven't been released yet until like Friday night. So that's the big thing. Is I'll sometimes like last week I updated like 6:30 or 30 minutes before lock, 15 minutes before lock for the last depth charts. So that's one thing you have to look to.
Mm-hmm.
Is I will sometimes be pushing like last minute updates based on the timing of the injury reports and depth chart releases for the Sunday games.
And I figure those can be pretty significant updates if we get a surprise
Yeah,
depth
like
chart change.
last week the Battlehawks were playing on Sunday, and they had a Akeem Butler questionable with a hamstring injury, who was like offensive player of the year last year in the league. So it was a huge deal. I had like 50-50 going into it just because I didn't know what was going to happen. I wanted to hedge. But that depth chart got released like 15 minutes before lock, and I was able to update that and bump all the other pass catchers. So they can be pretty like monumental changes.
What do you think? How would you describe the state of the UFL DFS ecosystem? Do you think it's a pretty high edge sport? Like, how do you think other models look? Where do you think it's at?
I think it's probably pretty efficient. It's hard to say, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I know Establish the Run does projections, and they do a really good job. Obviously, like they're good at everything. So that's like one solid competitor. They have like a large share of the pool, I would say, the player pool, and just like the overall contests are like shrinking I
Yeah.
like week 1 is like big, is like pretty nice, and then after
Yeah.
that they don't fill, they overlay, so it's like back down to scraps. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay.
So, but I did think like we have a pretty nice edge with like SaberSim
Yeah.
because
Well,
like
and
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, I think the Sims. I mean, we see it in football, in NFL and college football all the time. How important it is to have that play-by-play sim component, because
Yeah,
the averages tell a very small part of the story, but when you're trying to build for upside, it really matters to understand like how a game script can actually play out. So when you're
100%.
providing, I think, like these the market share, the usage, the efficiency of these players, and then we can build out the possible range of scripts. I think it really helps, just at least saving time to get high quality lineups in
Yeah,
play.
I mean, I believe we're the only ones that have a play-by-play sim for
Yes.
UFL, which is like that's a pretty nice like feature edge to have compared to like competitors. So
Mm-hmm. Are there showdown contests?
yeah, they so like last year they had like previous years they had 4 per week. Every game was a showdown.
Yeah.
This year it's only 2, which just kind of sucks. But like the flagship is usually 2K to first, which is nice. Like that's not nothing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Cool. What would you say is like the biggest strengths of your UFL system overall? What do you think you do better?
Attention to detail. I really do try to perfect all my inputs as much as I can. I'm reviewing like after I do my first run,
Mm-hmm.
keeping up with the news, like and like coupled with that is also having prior knowledge of these situations. Like
Yes.
last week we had a Birmingham's like 1B running back was out, so I knew how they handled the situation in the past, and I could like accurately project that more than maybe other people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah. I feel like any of these sports where news is impactful and breaks late and it's sometimes just kind of murky in the information you're getting, context matters so much. Like
100%.
what happened last week? What is this coach like in general? Like what types of statements does this coach make? And having that attention to detail and knowing, like you get a report that a particular player is questionable, and understanding that that doesn't always mean the exact same thing for every player, every team, every coach.
For sure.
Seems like a huge factor.
A little bit of nuance like in there, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Are there any I guess limitations, maybe one way to look at it, or anything that you look at your numbers and you're like, the next time I really have some time to iterate on this, I want to do this. Anything that you want to kind of build up?
I think the biggest thing is the quarterback, like the split quarterbacks, which you already touched on. Like it's hard to really. There's a range of outcomes there. Like I might have a 60-40 QB split projected, but just like we saw last week, that goes 100-0 sometimes. And I don't know if our sim is quite there to capture those ranges of outcomes, which can be really valuable because it's a quarterback position. It's, so that's one thing I might want to like fix, like work on in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I don't think that the sim will handle that in the way that like what that 60-40 actually means. But not to say it couldn't in the future. I think that'd be interesting. I know like for NBA, our minutes model and the minutes in the sims is distributed in that way. Like when we think about bench minutes for NBA, especially in a higher variance situation, maybe a starter's injured for the first time that season, our sim does kind of say, we're giving 20 minutes to this guy and 20 minutes to this guy, but there are individual sims where it's 34-0.
Yeah.
And that seems like a similar thing here. Yeah, exactly. That could be interesting there. So maybe something that we can build out.
I think one other thing is just like kind of maybe optimizing the player efficiency part of it, just like per catch, per pass statistics. That might be a little off sometimes. It's hard to really, I don't know, get the whole picture. I don't know. Maybe the player efficiency in a nutshell.
Are there like yards per route run or targets per route run, like meaningful, like but those numbers don't seem to have like a lot of signal with the sample size stuff?
I mean, players that have been in the league for a while, you can kind of get a good idea of who they are. Like we have players that have been in the spring league since 2020, 2022. Like you can start to get an idea of who and what they are. You can't really overreact to players that have run 50 routes in their UFL career or whatever. So
Do you look at any numbers from like guys that have played in the NFL or college numbers or anything like that?
I definitely look at college and try to adjust it for like competition. And then NFL preseason, like there's a lot of data there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's take it with a grain of rice. Just because a guy earned 20% of targets on his routes and the preseason doesn't really mean much for UFL, but it can mean something. Or like, was he using slot or out wide? That can mean something. Like things like that, little things.
Cool. Well, for everybody hanging out with us here live, if you have questions for Sam at any point, feel free to fire away into the chat. Anything else? I think we should maybe move to the Call of Duty model here, unless there's anything else you wanted to touch on with the football side of things.
No, I think that was everything.
Cool. Let's talk a little Call of Duty. This one I am particularly very interested in, especially because this is the first time we have provided any Call of Duty numbers. It's a sport that I am very unfamiliar with. It is not a game I am unfamiliar with. Have you played any Call of Duty? Do you like it?
Played it all growing up. Yeah, it was like one of my favorite games growing up. So
yeah, I played a ton. My game, I think it's always funny. You can kind of like guess people's age, I guess, based on what Call of Duty was their Call of Duty.
100%.
Mine was Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, like the original Modern Warfare. I played so much of that game.
Definitely played it, but not in its prime, I would say. It was a little after the fact.
Yeah, that was the prime game. When they remastered that one recently, that was a good
one for me. I did love the remaster. That was fun.
Yeah.
Underrated.
What's your favorite? Like favorite of all time, best one?
Either the original Modern Warfare 3 or probably Black Ops 2.
Nice.
So that's my era.
I played a ton of, and I promise I won't make this just an actual Call of Duty, the video game stream the whole time here, but I played a ton of Advanced Warfare 2, the one with the weird movement with like jetpacks and stuff. Yep. I got pretty into the like ranked ladder on that game and was grinding that super hard.
Yeah.
What's your favorite mode in Call of Duty games?
Probably domination or hardpoint. The objective mace modes.
Yeah. I like search and destroy. I always have.
Well, search is classic. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
With your friends, like it's the best.
It's the best. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's talk about Call of Duty. So I guess like ground level, what matters here? I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, that there is not a Vegas market here. Maybe
there
beyond.
Is.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, a bunch of books give like match lines and individual map lines. So that's good. I make that in.
Yeah. Okay. What else goes into there? Like how do we start building out a Call of Duty projection?
Yeah. I think it's kind of two-pronged. It's like team-oriented and player. So from a team perspective, I'd use the Vegas lines to kind of build out probabilities for like the series. So like we know this team's going to win X% of the time. We know they're going to sweep the series at this % of the time. I get all that from like the Vegas odds because it's all scored differently on DraftKings. And then you can kind of infer like how good the teams are based on Vegas odds too. So I use that as well to kind of guide me. And then player wise, it's just mainly slaying, like objective. There is a small objective part of it.
Yeah.
Very small though. Other than that, it's kills and deaths, which is 95% of it. So I'm pretty much just using data to try to predict that. Yeah.
Are there props for kills and things like that out there? Or how do you start to come to those numbers?
Prize Picks and Underdog have pretty nice markets, honestly. Like
nice. Yeah.
I think it's growing too. Like Prize Picks is marketing on like their Twitter a lot about COD. So they're pretty liquid, I would say.
So do players tend to use like the same kit over and over, and can you rely on that, or is there news that a particular player is like switching to sniping more or something like that? Like, does that come up?
There are role changes here and there, and you have to kind of track that yourself. Usually, like watching it, I try to go back and watch a little bit of every match just to make sure nothing changed, and it does make a difference. But usually, the meta is pretty set in stone, and players will be choosing that meta for whatever their role is going forward.
What does the meta look like? Like, how are teams kind of constructed?
Yeah, 2 ARs usually and 2 submachine guns. Sometimes the AR is like a flex, so they can be a submachine gun or an AR. And then you have like your main AR, which is usually like a little slower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there guys that are responsible more for being the objective getters and some guys that are responsible for racking up kills more? Are there
100% a team by team basis. Like
okay.
some teams, you have a guy on the hard point 30% of the time for the team,
Mm-hmm.
or 33% of the time. Sometimes it's very even, like 25% for every player, or 27%, like in the same range. It's just very team dependent.
And as far as it relates to the actual like DFS scoring, upside really is coming from those kills. So I guess teams that maybe have a more reliable Slayer type player are going to be more reliable sources of high projections in general, or how does that look?
Mean, I think it differs. Sometimes you get a high projection from just having a really good KD ratio. You can be a slower player and still, as long as you're getting kills, not dying as much as you're killing, like that's going to be good. Other times you're fast paced and you're aggressive, and each kill is worth 2 points to where a death's only worth 1 point. So that is why aggression usually wins out.
Yeah.
And that's how I would capture the ceiling, is you kind of want to be more SMG heavy because they have higher ceilings in general.
And I assume, so we've got a team position as well.
Yeah.
I assume that like we want to correlate
100%.
our lineups here, stack up like kind of similar. I know you mentioned before we got started that you haven't dabbled too much in League of Legends or Counter-Strike, but a similar thing where you're often building up a stack of a given team and then also throwing the team in there.
Yeah. I'm always trying to stack the team with at least one player, usually two, just because, I mean, if a team is doing good, generally the players on that team are doing good, and it's just how it's the correlation. Sometimes there are outliers, but I try not to play to those because, it's hard to predict.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about the right way to position this question. Do the teams that tend to win often end up being the ones that rack up a lot of kills? Or do you kind of want more of the, like, do the teams that end up giving you the most upside when the slate is over just steamroll the opponent? Or do you want like a full-on shootout, like
I see what you're saying.
Back and forth.
Like a back and forth close match.
Yeah.
It's hard. I guess I would say in previous titles, the favored team is usually making up the difference in kills by just winning like 3-0, like sweeping. This year it's a very like high engagement game, lots of kill and death opportunities, so those close like shootout matches sometimes can just outscore the teams that dominate. Again, hard to predict that. Like if there's a time variable with everything, like how long does each match and map last. But if it's like a 3-2 with like long games, you're going to have a lot of high scores from those games. But generally, the teams that are good, they're going to do the best. And that's where the direction I try to go towards. But sometimes I'll throw in some shootouts.
How much better are the good teams than the bad teams? What do the spreads look like here normally?
I would say the top like 2 or 3 teams are like kind of in a tier of their own, like by far. And then I would say the rest of the league, barring maybe a team, is all neck and neck. Any given day, they are better than the other team. So if you're getting one of those top 3 teams versus a bottom team, they're going to be a chalky option. But those like middle of the pack teams can offer a lot of upside at like lower ownership.
Gotcha. So I know one of the things that I saw looking through the scoring is that there's obviously different hard point is scored differently than search and destroy.
Yeah.
Are you rooting for certain modes to get played in a match? Is that predictive? Are they always played in some matches? How does that work?
Yeah. So it's always a hard point search and destroy control, hard point search and destroy setup. Okay. Now, whether it actually goes to 4 or 5 maps is, we can't predict that necessarily fully. But what I found is that if you have a team, like the team spot, you kind of want them to play 2 searches, because the searches is where the teams get all the points from plants and diffuses and round wins. And then for the players, like if you get 2 hard points, it's really nice. But you do get points if you don't play those maps. Like you get like some like 25 for not playing the hard point or 10 for not playing the search. So you do get credited with that.
How much do those like credited points matter? Like, do you need a team to really go the distance for 4 or 5 games in a match, or is that a serviceable amount of points to take something down if a team just sweeps?
If a team sweeps, it's usually enough, and it all depends on like if you have a 1.2 KD and you play only 3 or 4 maps, like that's going to be enough. Usually, like it's going to be a really good score. It all comes down to slang at the end of the day, whether
Yeah.
it's a 3 game map or a 5. Like you just gotta have a good KD or like a lot of kills and like a high engagements.
Are those kills weighted to how many games end up getting played?
So like the kills aren't weighted for different modes. So like search and destroy is a very low engagement mode because it's a
Right.
round based mode
Right.
compared to like hardpoint where you have it's like 10-15 minute games sometimes. They're all equal. The kills are all equal in terms of points. I wish they would weight search like more because it would make it more important for the players, but not the case.
Interesting. Okay. How I'm going to ask you the same question I did for UFL. What do you think of the Call of Duty DFS landscape? I do not know of maybe even any other Call of Duty projection model. I assume it's pretty
I've
soft.
never seen anyone have a projection model like on Twitter or anything. So my assumption is there are none, but there probably is somebody doing it just like I was. We just don't know about. But I would say like the ecosystem generally is growing, which is
good.
nice. It was something like UFL Showdown, like flagship usually 2K to first, which is nice. It's like not nothing, something to play for. So
yeah. For folks trying to use the projections, maybe playing for the first time, we mentioned some stacks and kind of stacking up teams is important. Do you want to just give maybe some general ideas on like what types of lineups that people should be trying to build?
For sure. So I'm usually my favorite's the 3-2-1 stack because I think you want like a 3 stack for the team that kind of dominates that slate. 2 from another team that does good, and then kind of like a one-off because specifically in this title, it's hard for the 3-3 stacks to work out. You have to be really perfect because the engagements are so high that some like usually one of your 3 stacks, one player doesn't get there because they just didn't do enough. So I try to go 3-2-1s primarily. 2-2-2s are also good. And then on smaller slates or like more narrow slates with favorites, I'll do 3-3s. But usually nothing less than like a 2-2-2. I'm always trying to stack at that minimum.
I know the contests are pretty small, but we've also got a pretty limited player pool here, only like 2 to 4 game slates. Are you actively trying to avoid dupes, or how contrarian do you try to get with your plays?
Honestly, that's kind of the hard part to me is like I don't know what the field's doing all the time. It's hard to project that with COD because like there's a wide range of outcomes. Like I might think a player is really good, they might project really well, and then they come in at 5% owned. That's happened before. And then there's no ownership projection. So I just kind of try to play it straight up and let the projections do the talking. Now, when I was doing projections by myself, that was a lot easier than not other people are using them. So there might be some duplication problems. I'm still like thinking about how to adjust to that. But yeah.
What do you think a player's range of outcomes looks like? Like if we had the distributions in the app from the Sims like we do for other sports, what do you think that point distribution looks like for these guys?
Wide. I would say COD is a very high variance game in a nutshell, like macro. So just because a player is like, they could be the best player in the game and have a good matchup, and they could still not be optimal. Like a large percentage of the time, they could do fine, but they might not go off. And the player you might not be thinking of, maybe they drop a 1.3 KD and they're optimal now. So they're just a very wide range of outcomes, and anybody can get there on any given day, usually. Other than like maybe like the worst team or the best team, like that's not going to happen. But generally, you can do great, you can fall flat. It just depends.
That's interesting to me. Do you have any like? Why do you think that is? I know that's a hard question to answer, but
a couple of things. It's a game of milliseconds. So if I shoot you 0.2 seconds before you shoot me, like that's all it comes down to. So it's like a lot of timings that go one way or another. It's also an internet-based game, like 90% of the time. So that plays a factor into it. If you've ever gamed online, like it can make a big difference.
Yeah,
just like the very millisecond, like the timing and.
Do you have like a X latency in your model for like tracking these individual players' internet connection?
I wish I did. If I knew that, it'd be a lot. I'd have a lot more money than I do right now, but it's just, you can't predict that.
So, I mean, on a practical level, I'm thinking like these are obviously in the SaberSim app just as projections, so we don't have the underlying sim. You're building in optimizer mode. My gut is that you probably want to play with some randomness settings and open those ranges of outcomes up a little bit.
I do use randomness for my builds, just because I want some varied. I don't want like the optimals all the time.
Right.
You want to throw some one-offs in there that are some like contrarian stacks that might get there at a certain percentage of the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes sorry to cut you
ahead.
off.
No.
Sometimes I even will manually bump up some lower level teams, mid-level teams, or players just to get that diversification and just kind of like like you would do like other sports with sims where you want those low owned players that go off, like give you a nice upside. I want to try to do that manually sometimes as well, because we don't have sims for COD, obviously. So that's kind of like a manual process.
Do you think players are... I am thinking it's probably kind of like a bimodal distribution with the wins and losses, similar to like we've seen a few of those before, like sports like MMA or tennis or even golf with the cut, where you've kind of got I actually could probably pull one up here for something maybe like Counter-Strike, but where you've got like the team wins side of the distribution and the team loses side of the distribution. And those both look semi-normal from there. Is my gut on like
I would say that's
look like underlying?
Pretty accurate. Yeah. I mean, but yeah, pretty accurate. But there are times where, like, for example, I think it was a couple weeks ago, a player dropped one of the highest point totals the entire season on the losing team.
Interesting.
So that can happen. It's rare, but I would say it's usually pretty win or lose, like left and right. So
gotcha. And yeah, so I mean that does make sense then with like the value of potentially having one-offs sneaking in there, like those 3-2-1 stacks you were talking about, where you kind of have that potential upside. Yeah.
If a player kind of controls the game for his team for a match and he's the only person that's really going off, you might not want to stack the team, but you might want that player. And so that's where think those come in handy.
Right. Are there game stacking components here? Is there correlation between opposing teams, or is that
I generally
negative?
Yeah. I avoid players against opponents unless it's a 2-game slate, which unless you're playing all 3 threes, which is viable. You got to have some opponents, but I will generally limit to like 1 per opponent if I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But there are situations where like it's just like a super long match and a lot of engagements, and sometimes like 4 players get there from the same team.
Right.
Or the same match, excuse me.
Cool. What would you say? Same question we did for UFL here. What do you think are the biggest strengths of the COD model?
Probably just my niche knowledge of I kind of know the players and the teams and like how good they are generally. And I can, if something changes like roster wise or role wise, I can kind of adapt to that pretty well. And I would say just like using my projection expertise and like analytical expertise to kind of use that for the projection. So I'm not too, I don't know how to say this. I don't know. I'm just keeping it like rest of the mean a little bit. Like I'm not too crazy, not outlierish, I'm like I would do for other sports.
That makes sense. So you mentioned like roster changes, things like that. How often do those happen?
Usually after each, like the season's broken up into stages, so like 4 stages. After each stage, you'll have roster changes from a few 2 or 3 teams maybe. Those are probably the hardest things to project because like you just don't know how the players are going to gel. Like it's a huge thing. It's just chemistry, how they play off each other. Like that's the hardest thing to project. But sometimes that's where you can get the biggest edge too. So
where do like the players coming into the league come from? Do you have data on them, or like where
they come from challengers? It's kind of like I would say like the minor leagues essentially. There is data. It's a little more limited than like the actual league, but you can, and like there's data going back a couple years, like a few years honestly. So you can kind of get a good picture of who they are. But again, you might think a player's good or bad, and they end up doing the opposite. So it's just kind of hard to project off the bat. So again, sample size,
Yeah. Is there like solo queue data?
No.
It probably wouldn't. I don't even know how much signal would be in there.
I don't think it's such a team-based game at the highest level. Like,
I assume I have not watched much Pro League Call of Duty. I have watched a ton of League of Legends. I assume it's like a completely different game than the average player would just experience queuing up for a game.
100%. Like there's just so many, like just positioning and gun skill. Like it's night and day. Strategy is just communication. Like it's just like you wouldn't be able to replicate it by yourself.
The other thing you had mentioned when you were talking about strengths, what was those priors?
Mm-hmm.
How do you end up factoring that in here? Like, is recent form more valuable than kind of your long-term prior view of a player? How do you adjust for like what's happened in a given split? What does that look like?
It's a great question. That's like probably the biggest like internal battle with the projections is kind of how to weight how good you think they actually are versus how good they've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So as the season starts, and for the first like 2.5, 3 months, I'm usually weighting my prior pretty heavily from what they've done last year, the previous years, and how good the team is.
Mm-hmm.
As the season goes on, I factor in that season data more and more and more. And then I also have like a recent data, like a 30-day, 60-day like stats, and I use damage. So like each player's their damage logged in an individual game, and think of it as like a batted ball stats for baseball. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you hit a ball super hard, but it's a line out to third.
Yeah.
And so in theory, that's a really good plate appearance, but in reality, it didn't turn out well. That can happen in COD too, where sometimes you just get unlucky in a game and you're doing a lot of damage and you're just not getting the kill or whatever it may, or maybe you're getting lucky and you're just hitting someone for one shot and they die and that's your kill now. So I kind of use damage and like the recent sample to get a good understanding about how a team or a player is playing at that moment.
I love that. That's like, yeah, batted ball is a good one. It's like, or like
underlying metrics,
targets. Yeah. Something like that. Like where, that's awesome. Anything else that you kind of want to improve? Limitations, things like that.
I think capturing player ceiling we touched on earlier is sometimes a manual process. Like submachine gun players have a higher ceiling in general. My projections are average based, so it's sometimes hard to capture that. So sometimes I just play around with that in like the build.
Mm-hmm.
So just like ranges of outcomes maybe is something I could work on in the future.
Have you played around with like any basic sims on your own of trying to?
I have like built out kind of variances and range of outcome for players.
Yeah.
Not as much as I could have or I should have, but I have done it before and like something I want to work on in the future when I have like off time.
I do think it'd be pretty fun to
I would love to have a sim one day. Like that's definitely a goal of mine. Now I just gotta find out how to do it and we're golden.
Well, I'm sure you could probably help us out with putting one together as well. I was gonna ask like what do you think the foundation of that would be? Like what would be so like the football sim is intaking particular metrics that end up being the foundation, and then we build out the sim from there. What do you think that would look like for Call of Duty?
It's probably just KD ratio. Like it's the big KD ratio plus engagements per like 10 minutes is usually what I go by. So just how aggressive are you and how good of a slayer are you?
Yeah.
That's like the foundation, like the most important part.
Uh-huh.
And I'm guessing you would kind of simulate each event as like a gunfight. And how would that go? I don't know. It's hard. That gets complex.
Yeah.
But that's like kind of my working thought.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, going that way, you could do it like bottom up, which would be really cool. Like I think you could come up with like kind of a top down using the spread and saying like this team wins this many rounds, this team wins this many rounds, and then just like flow the KD ratios down from there. But having it wouldn't be play by play, but it would be like gunfight by gunfight, or engagement by engagement sim for Call of Duty. Seems like that would be
I mean
pretty neat.
You could have a very wide range of outcomes doing that just because the gunfights are so close in like percentages. But yeah.
The last question I had here is, so what does the news cycle look like here? Are there updates to the projections after they come out? When did the initial projections come out, I guess is the good first question. And then does that change as lock is approaching?
So I always have the projections out the morning of the slate, just because I use like the prior day's data to try to get new, like better projections for the next day. So I always have the projections out the morning of. And then my last update is usually 45 to 60 minutes before the slate locks, because we get the maps for the first match, and maps play differently for different roles or teams. So I'll use that map set for the first match to I'll bake that into my projections, and that will affect players.
So we get the maps for the entire.
Only the first match, because they usually come out like an hour before that game is scheduled. So the other sets of matches will come out after lock. There's no late swap. So
got it. But we have the full map set for all the games that would be potentially played in the first match. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, and that sounds like that's probably pretty impactful.
Yeah, like some maps are bigger and like less engagement heavy, and they go quick. Like it's like a time thing too. Like some maps are shootouts where they play longer and you get more engagements, and some are shorter on average. And then some maps are higher engagement and some are not. So that all factors in the projection. And if you get an optimal map set, like it makes a big like a 5-10 point difference usually.
Are you attempting to project the maps that will be selected for the other games on the slate, or is it totally random? Like there's not really any way to do that.
So that usually is baked into like the player stats on that. Like if you have a high engagements per 10, it sometimes is based on like the maps you play on average. And I would like to get better at that. That's one of my goals, is to try to predict the map set. It is kind of complex on the back end. So maybe when I have off time, I can optimize that, but that's one of my goals for sure.
Cool. Well, we had a couple questions trickle in here about UFL. I think we are kind of getting to the end here. So folks that are watching, if you have other questions about either the UFL model or the COD model that Sam works on here, fire away now. We'll hit these real quick. I know we kind of touched on these a little bit, but I think we can come back to these here. Noah asked, haven't played much UFL. Is it like NFL? You want to chat a little bit more about like just the differences there?
Yeah, I would say the foundation is similar. Like it's the same game, but just the overall efficiency, explosiveness of the game is far different, and just not a lot of touchdowns on a week-to-week basis. There's only 4 games on a main slate for UFL compared to NFL, where there's like 12 to 14 games. So you don't have to be perfect to win the contest, essentially. You can have a guy that only scores 10 points and you can still get there.
Yeah, that might be a pretty good result, actually.
And the other thing is just it's a lot less projectable, so you can like feel comfortable like doing your own thing sometimes and taking a stand or playing a low on guy that you think just might be good and people aren't projecting it. Definitely has upside.
Do your numbers take pretty large stands against the market in UFL? Do you see that like at all, or are you
usually
pretty aligned?
No. I would say like if you compare it to like props or other projection sources, they're going to be like 90% similar. You might have a few exceptions that are off by a point or two, but they're usually pretty similar.
What do you think about this next question? What do you think about correlation and stacking in UFL, especially compared to something like NFL?
Yeah, so that's something I'm still working through myself. I know the Sims, if you sort by ROI, you're going to get a lot of like 3, 4, or 5 stacks. That probably comes from the fact there's only 8 teams, 4 games. If a team scores 30 points, they might, a 5 stack might take it down. I tend to limit my stacks a little more to 2 or 3, or 1, obviously, 1 single stacks, and just try to play the best plays on average. But that is definitely like whatever your own taste is, like whatever your own strategy is what I would just go with. But I try to go single or double stacks on average.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I mean that makes sense with totals and team totals being a little lower. Like, I mean, I'm sure we're going to have slates where you need the QB +4 to get it done. But if the teams are less efficient, scoring is a little bit lower. The clock's always running. Like it does leave a little bit less room for that to
It's hard to. I mean, 4 touchdowns, so like 4 different players in theory, like that's kind of what you need. It's hard to do in
for
the
sure.
UFL. It's possible, but hard to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one way to experiment with that too in SaberSim would just be taking down that correlation slider like 1 notch, maybe 2, and experimenting with some builds like that. I think that those sliders are more than likely using the NFL defaults there.
I always wondered about that too. So,
yeah, I'm not positive about that, but that is my hunch. So I think we could maybe experiment with that too. So, but yeah, here we've got a minute here. Let me pull up the slate here and kind of walk through. So these sliders, for folks that don't know where they have gone, are in this little gear icon now, next to the build lineups button. Oh, actually, no, these are different. Correlation is down at 2 here. So
what would they usually be for a 4-game NFL slate?
For a 4-game, I think that was the difference, is what I wasn't thinking about. Yeah, it's cranked up quite a bit for the like 12 games NFL. I think you'll see it at like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Because with so many more players in the pool and the wide sim diversity, you need a little bit more of the correlation boost to get the stacks to show up at all. But with just 8 teams, 4 games, the correlation can come down a little bit. So let's run one for fun here and just kind of see what it looks like here. And see what's going on. So, how have, I guess a good question, where are we at in the Call of Duty season right now? I don't even have any idea.
We're probably like 60% of the way through. I think it ends late in May.
Okay.
We have like 10 or 12 straight weeks of COD coming up. Usually there's some breaks in between majors, but it's like full sprint to the end now, which is nice. Keeps us busy.
When are the majors?
Usually like once every 90 days, maybe like 60 to 90 days.
Yeah. How do the DFS contests look like for those? Are they souped up a little bit, or
you will get like an occasional like 10K prize pool, which usually is like 6,000 or 8,000 for the normal slates. So you do get a little extra juice in there for the majors sometimes.
That's fun. Cool. Yeah. So default build here on those sliders. We are, let's look at like the top 150. So QB plus 2, our second most popular stack is the QB plus 3. Not too bad in terms of giant stacks here, but this is like definitely getting to be a little bit.
Yeah. I would assume if you were to do sim ROI on the contest in, it's going to change that a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
My strategy is usually with the stacks, I try like the pull exposure, and I don't want to like double
just
up
eliminate
what
those.
The pull exposure is. So if it's like a 10% QB plus 3 for like a team stack,
yeah,
I'll usually cap it like 20 just to be kind of safe.
Yeah. Gotcha. I use the pool exposure quite a bit. Yeah. So, I mean, sim ROI, we're sorting by sim ROI here. So souping up those stacks a little bit here. But not too bad. I guess the other thing, and I wasn't even thinking about this, is like smaller lineups, period. Like QB, these mean more. These are larger stacks as a proportion of your lineup than they are in NFL. So
one running back.
Right.
One receiver or 2 receiver spots. So it's the dynamics a little different.
Yeah. So I do think, could still experiment with maybe like a correlation at 1 or something like that if you wanted the stacks to come down a tad. But I think they look.
That's pretty solid for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, Sam, anything else you wanted to touch on here? We are coming up on the hour mark. Either sport, anything that we didn't get to, kind of final thoughts on your end?
Yeah, just I'm in Discord. If you ever need anything for COD or UFL, I'll be checking that occasionally. If you ever need anything urgently, at me, Sam-SaberSim. So I was excited. I'm excited to be helping the team, and thank you for your time. Yeah,
we're excited to have you. I'm glad you were able to jump on and do this today. I got to make sure, if nobody's taken care of it for you yet, that you get the nice green SaberSim name, the team name. I don't think you have one yet.
I don't think I have it.
So I'll make sure you get that there.
Appreciate it.
I will mention to anybody that's been hanging out with us here for the past hour that we do have a free 5-day trial on our site, SaberSim.com. If you don't already subscribe to SaberSim, want to check out the COD projections, want to check out the improved UFL sims, we reset everyone's free trial as well at the start of baseball season. So if you've tried us before, want to come check out the new stuff here, now is a great time to do it. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us here. Sam, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
And we will see everybody later.